Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel JB's Lecture. I am Jui Bhattacharya and today in this video I shall discuss about the summary of the story The Sound Machine written by Roald Dahl. This particular narrative was first published in The Complete Short Stories in the year 1949. So, if we consider this particular story, we can find that there are three main characters. Two are main characters and one is a partially main character in this particular short story. The first character is Klosner. He is the subject of the story. Then there is coming Dr. Scott. Dr. Scott is Klosner's physician as well as a guide and a friend, you can say. And then there is coming Mrs. Saunders. Mrs. Saunders is the neighbor of Klosner. Now, in this brief narrative, we can find Klosner is making, or we can find Klosner made a voice box or a or a sound machine. Why did he make so? He made that voice box in order to identify those voices which, or you can say in order to uncover those voices which human ears cannot detect directly, okay, or which are beyond a human being's ability of identifying or detecting. Actually, a sound which is in between 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, that particular sound or those sounds can be detected by human beings properly. Okay, other sounds which, like, dogs can hear or dolphins can hear, those high pitched or very low pitched sounds human ears cannot identify. This is a scientifically proven fact, and Klosner actually worked to improve that particular thing. He wanted to listen to each and every noise, or you can say each and every type of voice. Actually, he was passionate about it. He was very much passionate about noise. Now, if you go through the story for one time, for the very first time, you would find Klosner, you might find Klosner as a fanatic, as an insane character. But if you go for this story for 3 to 4 times severally, or for some people 2 times, you can find that this particular short story is a scientific fiction as well as an environmental moral story, because this story actually gives us a lesson. Okay, what type of lesson? You can say that this particular story is an assertion on how human beings brutally are killing the trees, harming the environment. They are insensitive. They are becoming insensitive day by day. They are becoming insensitive towards themselves only. Then how it can be expected that they will not be insensitive towards the environment? They are lacking that particular emotional empathy within themselves. Okay, now let us start the story in short. Klosner here was busy in creating his voice box, or you can say the sound machine. He created a temporary laboratory under the shade in his yard, and there he made a tomb-like, a particular machine which had a kind of tomb shape with a lot of linking wires and cords and valves. He invested a lot of time in that, and he always focused in his research. He sketched some pictures and he worked with the wares for so long, because he had a kind of motto in his mind that he would hear all the unheard noises or voice. Okay, now Dr. Scott was his physician as well as his friend. He shared all his troubles, problems, thoughts, and whatever he was discovering, his new researches to Dr. Scott. Those things did bother Dr. Scott, but Dr. Scott never forgot his responsibility as a doctor too. He never ever disappointed Klausner in any way. Whatever Klausner said, whatever Klausner said was not that much harmful, but to some extent different from other people's thoughts. Now, whenever we the human beings, ordinary human beings, find something different from the facts that we follow, from the habits that we are having, we consider those facts, different facts, as abnormal. Okay, abnormalities, this particular terminology is coming from those facts which we consider to be abnormal or not normal, something different. We always take some time to consider something which is different from the as usual day to day decorums that we follow, norms that we follow. Okay, that is how, or that is why, for some people Klausner becomes to some extent insane or fanatic, and whatever he told Dr. Scott to do or whatever he did seemed to be ludicrous. So at a particular time when Klausner thought that his voice machine became ready, almost ready to capture the voice or the unheard noises, he took that machine out of his ear in his garden. He placed it, and after listening to the very mild buzzing sound from that machine only, he became to some extent impatient. But all of a sudden, he heard a very sharp noise of crying. It seemed like a woman was crying in pain. He got surprised. He turned back and he saw Mrs. Saunders, who was plucking the roses from the rose stems. She was actually clipping the rose stems. So, Klausner was very much sure about the fact that Mrs. Saunders was not crying. So, what did he do? He took his machine and he used the earbuds into his ears, and he went to Mrs. Launder and he requested Mrs. Launders to cut the stem once again. She did it, and again that same voice he heard, and he got sure about the fact that that particular voice was coming from the rose stems only. Those rose stems were actually crying out of pain. He promptly went to elaborate all those facts to Mrs. Launders, but Mrs. Launders too, at that particular moment, got very much clean and clear about the fact that Klausner was insane. She returned her home out of fear, actually, out of the very abnormalities coming from Klausner, or out of the very abnormalities shown by Klausner. Now, Klausner became sure, and he went back and he decided to call Dr. Scott because he had a lot of thoughts to share with Dr. Scott. He called Dr. Scott. Dr. Scott became to some extent, he disturbed, perturbed. Yet, he did not forget his responsibilities as a doctor. Okay, he came. Here, Klausner described everything to Dr. Scott. Though those thoughts did not seem to be very much clear to Dr. Scott, yet he did not at all yell at him, yet he did not at all deny all the thoughts invented by Klausner. Next day, what happened? Klausner himself took a step. Klausner took his machine outside and he cut a stem of a tree. Dr. Scott was present over there. One of the when he cut the tree, he heard that a kind of harsh and a very sharp yet harsh voice was coming from the tree. Again, he became sure about the fact that the tree was crying out of pain. Now, all of a sudden, one of the branches of the tree fell down, and it was about to harm Klausner and Dr. Scott, but somehow Dr. Scott saved himself and Klausner was also saved. But that machine, which was the source of effort, which was the source of expectations of Klausner, became completely crushed under it. Klausner was shocked, but he was much more worried about the very injured place of the tree. In order to save himself from the guilt feeling, he requested Dr. Scott to put some iodine on the injured place of the tree. Definitely, it seemed to be very odd to Dr. Scott, and right at the very beginning, he did not agree to do that. But afterwards, Klausner forced Dr. Scott to put iodine, and he did so. Putting some iodine on the injured place would never ever be that much harmful. Therefore, Dr. Scott did so. Now, Klausner was to some extent out of the guilt feeling, and he also became sure that trees are definitely having lives and they do cry. They did cry, they do cry, they will cry out of pain. Okay? So, this is the very outline of the story. But this particular story actually gives us a lesson. What is the lesson? That the human beings should be much more sympathetic towards the environment. And nowadays, it becomes a necessity to save ourselves from the grudge of the environment only. We are cutting trees after trees, and the environment would leave us? Never. Right now, the environment is taking revenge upon us. Now, we should definitely plant more trees, but the trees will definitely take some time to be grown up. And during those days, particular days, or during those upcoming days, the nature will not leave us. All the natural calamities and that excessively heat which we are suffering right now is what the very result of our own deeds. We have become selfish now. We have started to save trees. We have started to plant trees too in order to save ourselves. But if cutting trees would not harm us in any way, then definitely we would not also do all the things that we are doing right now. We are saving trees because of ourselves only, not because of the trees. However, that's a different issue. But what this particular story teaches us, what does this story teach us? That we should always be sympathetic. We should always show some empathy towards the trees, the environment, because trees are also the creatures created by God, and a kind of coexistence among the trees, animals, human beings. This is called a kind of coexistence. This is very much necessary, and we don't have the very right of destroy those things, those stuff created by God himself. We cannot give birth to a tree, so we don't have the right to kill a tree too. So this story teaches us to be sympathetic, not merely to the human beings but to the environment too. And this story also teaches us that a book can never ever be judged by its cover. Klausner can be judged as an insane one, as a mad personality, psychologically disturbed personality, within a minute, just after having a single read of this particular story. But it is having a very deep, profound meaning that Klausner is different but not abnormal. Klausner is the mirror of how a human being, true human being, should be. Understood? I guess this story is quite clear to you right now. If you are having any query, you can always comment below. If you are having any suggestion to give us, you can always comment below. I am over here waiting for your comments, for your share. If you feel that this particular video is helpful to you, please do share among your friends, family members, cousins, and also encourage me by subscribing to my channel, liking my contents. Okay, so bye for today. I shall come with the next video very soon. Take care.